I once picked up a hitchhiker who told me something that still keeps me up at night. He didn't say much at first, just a single, unsettling comment that I can't shake. You know, he mumbled, his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror. It's not always the roads you have to worry about. Sometimes, it's the places they lead you to. The way he said it, so calm, so matter-of-fact, made the hairs on my arms stand up. It wasn't a warning. It felt more like a simple observation, a truth he had learned the hard way. It's a truth I learned soon after. It was late summer in rural Pennsylvania. The sun had just set, painting the sky in deep purples and oranges, and I was on my way home from a weekend trip. I took a detour off the main interstate, hoping to find a more scenic route through the Allegheny Mountains. My truck, an old Ford F-150, rumbled along a two-lane state highway, surrounded by dense, dark forest on both sides. I hadn't seen another car in over half an hour. That's when I saw him, standing on the shoulder, a lone figure silhouetted against the fading light. He was a young guy, maybe in his early 20s, with a shaggy backpack and a sign that just read West. There was nothing menacing about him. In fact, he looked tired and a little desperate. Against my better judgment, I pulled over. He climbed in, thanked me quietly, and settled into the passenger seat. The air in the cab grew thick with a silence that wasn't comfortable, but not yet threatening. I tried to make small talk, but his answers were brief, almost monosyllabic. He just kept staring into the rearview mirror, as if expecting something to appear behind us. The sun disappeared completely, and the forest became a wall of impenetrable darkness. The only light was from my headlights, cutting a tunnel through the night. The road began to twist and turn, and I realized I was far more lost than I thought. My GPS signal had dropped out a while ago. That's when the strangeness began. As we passed a sign for a town called Millbrook, the hitchhiker finally spoke up. "Don't stop there," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Whatever you do, don't stop." I glanced at him, but his face was unreadable in the dim light. I nodded, though I had no intention of stopping anyway. A few miles later, as we rounded a sharp curve, I saw it, a woman standing on the side of the road, her thumb out. She was wearing a simple white dress, and her long hair was completely still in the wind. She looked wrong, too perfect, too still. I sped up, passing her without a second thought. "Good," the hitchhiker said, a new urgency in his tone. "Don't stop for any of them." "Any of who?" I asked, my heart beginning to pound. "The others," he replied, pointing ahead. I squinted into the darkness and saw a shape on the side of the road. It was a man, hunched over, his face hidden by a wide-brimmed hat. I drove past him, too. Then came another, a young boy with a teddy bear, and another, an old woman with a cane. Each one was more unsettling than the last, their forms hazy, their postures unnatural. I gripped the steering wheel so hard, my knuckles turned white. My passenger remained silent, his gaze fixed on each figure as we passed. "Are they real?" I finally managed to ask, my voice trembling. He didn't answer. He just pointed to the road ahead. The highway was now lined with them, dozens of figures, all silently standing, their thumbs outstretched. The light from my headlights caught their eyes, and for a fleeting moment, I saw them glowing with a faint, sickly yellow light. I slammed the gas pedal, the engine roaring as the figures melted into the darkness behind us. Suddenly, a figure appeared right in the middle of the road, directly in the path of my truck. It was a girl, maybe 10 years old, with her arms outstretched. My foot instinctively hit the brake, and the truck skidded to a halt, the tires screeching. The girl was so close, I could see the details of her face pale, sunken eyes, a wide, unnatural smile. As I stared, paralyzed with fear, her head tilted at a sickening angle, and she began to float upwards, her body twisting and contorting in the air, like a marionette with its strings tangled. The hitchhiker beside me finally spoke, his voice filled with a terrible sadness. "This is it," he whispered. "This is the place." I looked at him, and for the first time, I saw his face clearly in the dim glow of the dashboard. His eyes, too, glowed with that same sickly yellow light. He was just like them, just as the girl's form dissolved into a fine black dust. The hitchhiker's body began to shimmer, his skin becoming transparent, revealing a skeletal form underneath. I hit the gas, the tires spinning on the loose gravel before finding purchase. The truck shot forward, leaving the shimmering figure and the empty road behind. I didn't look in the rearview mirror. I just drove. I drove 4 hours, until the sun began to rise, and I saw the first signs of a familiar town. I pulled into a gas station, my hands shaking so badly I could barely turn off the ignition. When I finally dared to look over, the passenger seat was empty. The backpack was gone. The only evidence was a faint, lingering scent of dry leaves and old dust, a smell I now associate with desolation. I never saw him again, but I've learned to listen to the road, and I've learned that the true horrors aren't always the ones you see in the dark, but the ones you let in. It's been over a decade since it happened, and I still can't stand being out on the road after dark, especially in the rain. People always say the eyes are the windows to the soul, and I used to believe that. But what I saw in his eyes, it wasn't a soul looking out. It was something else, something hollow and ancient, and it felt like it was looking right through me, not at me. It was the kind of look that makes you feel like an insect under a microscope, utterly insignificant and already destined for a terrible end. I wish I had just kept driving. I was on my way from Chicago to visit my sister in Wisconsin. It was the middle of the night, and a storm had rolled in, turning the interstate into a slick, dangerous river. I decided to get off the main highway and take the old back roads to avoid the worst of the traffic and the blinding spray from the semi. It was a bad choice. The roads were narrow and winding, with no street lights, and the trees on either side of the pavement seemed to swallow my car's headlights. That's when I saw him, standing under the lone light of a flickering neon sign for a closed diner. He was tall and gaunt, wearing a trench coat that was soaked through. He didn't have a thumb out. He just stood there, staring intently at my car as I approached. Something about his stillness was unnerving, but I felt a pang of pity. It was a terrible night to be stranded. I pulled over just past him, and he got in, the cab instantly smelling of wet earth and something metallic, like rust. He didn't speak. He just sat there, and for the first time, I felt the cold that had nothing to do with the rain outside. The drive continued in silence. The rain intensified, and the windshield wipers struggled to keep up. I tried to make conversation, asking him where he was headed. He didn't answer. I looked over, and he was staring straight ahead, his face a mask of profound emptiness. I felt my unease turn to fear. Every few minutes, I would glance at the rearview mirror, but he never looked back. He only ever stared forward, at the road ahead. We passed through a couple of small, sleeping towns. The streetlights were out in most places, and the houses were dark. It felt like we were driving through a ghost town. The weirdest part, though, was the reflection. As we passed under the occasional working streetlight, I'd catch a glimpse of his reflection in the side window. It wasn't quite right. His reflection moved a split second after he did, like an echo or a glitch. It was a subtle thing, so subtle I almost dismissed it as a trick of the light and the rain. But then, it happened again, and again. Each time, the lag was a little more pronounced. A knot of pure dread began to tighten in my stomach. The silence in the car was no longer just quiet. It was a heavy, suffocating weight. I wanted to scream, to pull over and kick him out, but my body felt frozen. I just kept driving, hoping I was getting closer to a larger town, to a place with people and light. I drove for what felt like hours, the rain never letting up. The reflection in the window was now a full second behind his movements. I could see him turn his head in the reflection before he actually turned it beside me. My heart was pounding in my chest. I knew I had to get away from him, but I couldn't just stop on this desolate road. Just as I was about to reach the breaking point, he spoke. His voice was a low, guttural rasp, as if he hadn't used it in a very long time. "You missed a turn," he said. I glanced at the GPS, which was finally getting a signal. It showed a turn onto a small gravel road leading into the woods, a turn I was about to pass. "That's where I need to go," he added. I hesitated. Every instinct in my body screamed to ignore him and keep going, but his tone was no longer a suggestion. It was a command. I turned onto the gravel road, the tires crunching loudly. The trees closed in, and the rain began to fall even harder, so thick I could barely see. That's when I saw the house. It was a dilapidated farmhouse, barely visible through the downpour. It looked completely abandoned. The hitchhiker's voice cut through the sound of the rain. "Stop here." I pulled to a stop. He turned to me, and that's when I saw them, his eyes. They weren't black or brown. They were completely white, like polished bone, and they weren't looking at me. They were looking at something in the distance, something I couldn't see. He reached for the door handle. I watched his reflection in the window as his hand passed right through it, but his actual hand beside me was solid. That's when I saw it. The thing in the passenger seat wasn't the man I had picked up. It was just a shell. The actual man was in the reflection, his face a mask of terror, his mouth open in a silent scream, his hand reaching for the window, as if trying to get out. It wasn't a reflection at all. It was a person, trapped, and the thing beside me, it was just a shadow, a puppet. The entity in the car opened the door and stepped out. It turned to me, and for the first time, its hollow eyes met mine. Its lips pulled back into a chillingly wide grin, and it said, in a voice that was no longer a rasp, but a distorted echo of my own, "Thanks for the ride. I needed a new one." Then, it walked off into the darkness, its footsteps making no sound on the gravel. I screamed, flooring the gas pedal. I didn't stop until I was at my sister's house, and even then, I couldn't shake the image of that trapped man in the window, or the look on the face of the thing that drove off into the night. I still see that look sometimes, in the dark, in the quiet, in the rain. I'm a long-haul trucker, been driving the American highways for 20 years. You see a lot of strange things out there, and you hear a lot of stories. Most of them are just tall tales, born out of boredom and too much coffee. But there's one story I know is true, because it happened to me. It wasn't about a monster or a ghost. It was about something far worse, a promise, a deal I made in the middle of nowhere, and the terrible price I've been paying for it ever since. It started with a simple gesture of kindness, and ended with me losing something I can never get back. It was a scorcher of a night in Arizona, a few hours after sunset. The air was still thick and heavy with the day's heat, and the asphalt shimmered under the moonlight. I was pushing hard to make a delivery in Phoenix, and I was running on fumes and the faint glow of the dashboard lights. The road was a long, straight line cutting through the desert, and I hadn't seen another vehicle for at least an hour. My radio was on the fritz, just static and the occasional snippet of a religious broadcast. So the only sound was the drone of my engine and the whisper of the wind against my cab. Up ahead, I saw a figure on the side of the road. It was a girl, couldn't have been more than 18, with a suitcase at her feet and a sign that read "Anywhere." She looked clean and well-dressed, not like your typical drifter. Something about her just seemed lost. I told myself it was stupid, but I slowed down and pulled the rig onto the wide shoulder. As she climbed into the passenger seat, I noticed her eyes were an unsettling shade of violet, and she had a faint, sweet smell about her, like honeysuckle and dust. We drove in silence for a while. The only sound the hum of the engine and the rhythmic slap of the road lines passing under the tires. The strangeness started when she finally spoke. "You're a good man," she said, her voice soft and melodic. "Not many people would stop out here." I shrugged, a little uncomfortable. "Just doing what I can," I replied. "You're a long way from home." She turned to me, her violet eyes seeming to glow in the darkness. "I am home," she said, and then added with a strange, chilling finality. "I've been on this road forever." My unease deepened, but I tried to laugh it off. "Well, you and me both, kid." But she didn't laugh. She just watched the road, her expression unreadable. A few miles later, we came to a desolate stretch where the road was completely dark, and I realized my headlights were getting dim. The engine sputtered, coughed, and died. We were stranded. The girl simply looked at me, a faint smile on her lips. "Don't worry," she said. "I can help." Before I could ask what she meant, a sudden blinding flash of purple light filled the cab. It was so intense I had to shut my eyes. When I opened them, the lights on my dashboard were working again. The engine was humming, and the girl was gone. But there was a folded piece of paper on the seat where she had been. I took the paper and unfolded it, my hands shaking. It was a single-sentence note, written in a spidery, elegant script. "I took your memory of joy." I froze. What did that mean? What memory? A cold dread seeped into me, but I started the truck and got back on the road. The truck ran perfectly now, better than it ever had. The headlights were brighter, the engine smoother. But as the miles passed, I felt a terrible emptiness begin to bloom inside me. I tried to think of my son's high school graduation. The moment he walked across the stage, the proud swell in my chest. Nothing. The memory was just a blank space. I tried to remember the day I married my wife. The first time I held her hand. Gone. The feeling of pure, unadulterated happiness was just a void. It wasn't just a loss of memory. It was the loss of the emotion, the joy that came with it. All the things that had made my life meaningful, all the moments that made the hard work worth it, they were just empty facts now. I felt hollowed out, a walking shell of a man. The emptiness was a physical ache in my chest. A week later, on the way back from my delivery, I passed that same stretch of road. The girl was there again, her thumb out, a serene smile on her face. I saw the empty space on the passenger seat, the piece of paper waiting. I could have driven past, could have kept my miserable, empty life, but I couldn't. I felt a terrible compulsion, an almost magnetic pull to her. I knew what she was. She was a collector, a scavenger of lost things. My truck slowed down and I pulled over, the gravel crunching under the tires. She opened the door and I looked into those unnerving violet eyes. "Another payment?" she asked, her voice a soft velvet whisper. I just nodded, feeling a tear slide down my cheek, a tear that felt alien to a heart that no longer remembered true happiness. She reached across the cab, her hand floating just inches from my face. I could feel a cold, sucking sensation, a vacuum of a void reaching out to me. A memory of my daughter's first day of school, a memory I had held onto for so long, was gone. The feeling, the pride, the fear, the love, all of it, just vanished. She smiled, and then she was gone. I'm still driving. I don't know what she took, but the hollowness is growing. And I know, one day, I'll see her again, and I'll stop, because the road is all I have left now. The truck, the asphalt, and the constant, crushing knowledge that every memory of joy I have is just on loan, and one day, I won't have any left.